Do you ever ask yourself, am I consistent? I do. And honestly, I try not to be when the time demands change. Emerson is quoted as saying, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds." I think this is a wise thought, and in fact, tend to apply the concept more liberally than he might have thought appropriate. For example, I want to take a break from our current discussion of transgenderism to talk about war. A current topic as the United States and Israel prosecute a war on Iran. For some focus, whenever I talk about war, one of my first thoughts goes to the writings of Karl von Clausewitz. You may not have heard of him. He lived from the 1780s to the 1830s. Oh, by the way, I have used Gemini artificial intelligence to help research this essay. Now, Clausewitz was a Prussian general and a military theorist. Some would say he was chronicling the period of European history that set the stage for the world wars. I would add that his writings have influenced all Western military thinking since those wars, and heavily influenced our concepts of collective defense and alliance. Now, Clausewitz defined war not as an isolated act of violence, but as a complex social and political phenomenon. His most famous statement was that war is a mere continuation of policy by other means. Clausewitz war is never an end in itself. It is most simply an act of violence to compel our opponent to fulfill our will. See, Clausewitz recognized that war is not purely rational, and that every war is composed of three dominant tendencies. These are worth remembering. The first tendency, primordial violence. Those blind natural forces of hatred, enmity, and passion. See, without the emotional drive of the population, a nation cannot sustain a war. Chance and probability. The interaction of strategy, courage, and talent, those fundamentals that we often think are foundational to war. And subordination to reason. See, a lot of us think that war is not reasonable, it's not rational, but for Clausewitz, and I think for me, war is subordinated to reason because the rational calculation of the war's goals and its role as a tool of policy has to be considered. As you consider our war, joined by Israel on Iran, I recommend you consider the complexity and the facts and factors associated with these three tendencies regarding this war. I believe that our Constitution was written to insist that not one or another branch of government consider these factors and tendencies, or factors and tendencies similar to them, but rather that the people, the property-owning, mostly white men, considered as people at the time, or their representatives, would consider them. And clearly, we have expanded the notion of the people who should be part of these considerations. See, the founders thought this because of their lived and learned experience watching monarchs and detached House of Lord parliaments be the only ones deciding on wars that the people would fight and die to execute. Now, they could not have chosen a more difficult way to manage the decision to make war. But experience is a harsh master, And that is where their experience and their education led them. I'm not going to comment on the rightness or wrongness of this war, just as I have not chosen or have chosen not to comment on the rightness or wrongness of our war on Venezuela. And I will not comment on the competence or character of any of our leaders who are presently making these choices, beyond asking you if you are being given sufficient information to consider these three tendencies yourself. Finally, I will ask you if you think the decisions made to launch these wars, which are starkly at odds with where our Constitution would have them made, is where you want them to be made. Considering primordial violence, chance and probability, and the primacy of reason. Is your voice being heard or even solicited? And are you okay with that? If you are, tell your representatives. If you are not, tell your representative. At least let them hear your voice. Aloha.